Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Redmen TV and your latest episode of Transfer Insight. My name is Dan Clubb. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by sports data journalist for Opta, David Segar. David, my friend, how are you? Okay.
I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all good, thanks. I'm all good. Ready for the summer. Ready for what looks to be a very busy summer from a Liverpool point of view. It started already. Just as I thought we are going to have a quiet 2 weeks or so and let the Club World Cup people do their business, Liverpool have been more active than anybody could have foreseen. And here we are about to speak about a couple of players who Liverpool are currently on the brink of maybe signing, he says, through gritted teeth, just about. Yeah, it's been a quite protracted negotiation with one in particular, but we are getting there, I think it's fair to say, right now. And we'll start with the one we seem to be getting there with, Florian Wirtz. Top line, wonderful footballer, amazing footballer. Love watching him. Entertainment, double-footed, creative, just a joy to behold, really. But beyond all of that, when you dig a little bit beneath the surface, as you've so brilliantly done in your recent piece, entitled "Why Liverpool Target Florian Wirtz Would Be Worth the Record Fee." He's just great, isn't he? I guess, David. But there's more to it than that, isn't there? He's great in terms of eye test, but he's also just great in terms of numbers as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when you do what we do, which is to try and back things up with the data, you're always hopeful that a player you've seen and has passed the eye test also passes the data test because they do go hand in hand. Like you can't really have one without the other. So there's plenty of players who you'd see who you'd think, well, he looks amazing, and then you look drill down into his numbers and you're like, oh, okay, that's really just on the surface. He actually isn't contributing that much. He just does a lot of step overs or whatever. But then with Florian Wirtz, yeah, there's his output is obviously incredible. His underlying numbers are incredible, and obviously, I mean, the fact is, we know this about Liverpool that the fact they're going for him means that his numbers are good. Like that Liverpool don't just think, you know what, he looks good. I'm not even going to bother checking the stats. They're probably fine. Let's just throw 100 million at him. So yeah, the fact that Liverpool are going for him, I think, says it all. But yeah, as you said, he's got pretty much everything. He's creative. He scores goals. He sets up goals. He sets up chances. He works hard off the ball. His passing is good, but not too timid. Like he's optimistic with his passing. His progressive passes received. I mean, this was the thing about the article is we try obviously to keep them not short, but like short enough that it's not like obviously just a long read. No one's going to want to read something for 20 minutes, so it can't be like 3,000, 4,000 words. But with Wirtz, it was so. I'd always really try and keep my articles below 2,000 words, if possible. But with Wirtz, it was so difficult. The first draft was close to 3,000. I had to cut a lot out because there was just so much to go into with him. Like pretty much every metric you looked at, he was near the top, or was always at least impressive, or more impressive than you thought he might be for a player of his stature. So yeah, not to gush too much this early in the chat, but yeah, he's a phenomenal player, and there's very good reason Liverpool seem to be willing to spend that kind of money on.
No, you're right. And the money is one thing, of course. Liverpool rarely do this sort of thing. It has to be a bit of a unicorn, a bit of an exception to Liverpool's rule, it's fair to say. I think Florian Wirtz is that. And it's interesting, obviously, you mentioned there the fact that Liverpool are in the market for this caliber of footballer and again, this financial level of footballer as well means that he is a little bit special. But we've had these conversations a few times now about Liverpool signings. Not all of them have been under the guidance of under the stewardship of Michael Edwards being in situ, but it's interesting now Michael Edwards is back in situ. We can speak openly about the fact that this will be very data driven. Liverpool's recruitment policy has always been that, but I did wonder for a little time there when obviously Edwards left, Julian Ward followed, and it was Jörg Schmadtke in situ. I thought, okay, how data driven is this for a bit? But yeah, clearly now with those two back on board and indeed Richard Hughes, it feels like we've reverted to what was a very successful type. So let's have a look at some of the numbers Liverpool may well have been looking at as well then in that case, and obviously ones that you've discovered. The numbers are impressive just in terms of the tangible assists and goals, but beneath that a little bit as well. In terms of his attacking output, that's probably the place to start. What was it that caught the eye most of all? You mentioned progressive passes there, but I noticed in the article he made and received the third most progressive passes. That's interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, it essentially means he in both on and off the ball he opens play up. So you've got a lot of you'll find a lot of players, and when you look at progressive passing numbers, there are. I mean, he was eighth, I think, in the Bundesliga for progressive passes made. There were a few players ahead of him, but of all of those players, that's pretty much all they did. They didn't really receive any. They were, I mean, Joshua Kimmich at Bayern Munich was miles ahead of everyone for that, and he's a stunning player as well. But obviously plays a lot deeper than Wirtz, and so his job essentially was just to get the ball forward. So he was attempting a lot of those passes, but because he's got so much quality, he was also completing them, and so he was racking up those numbers. With someone like Wirtz, that he makes those passes higher up the pitch as well, which obviously is trickier to do because in theory it's a more enclosed space. There's less space to play those passes into. But also when he's not on the ball and other players like Granit Xhaka or Grimaldo or one of the defenders was on the ball, he would be getting himself into space so he could receive them as well to allow his teammates to play those kinds of passes. So it's effectively double the attempts to create attacks that a lot of other players do. Whereas playing obviously in that number 10 role that he does slightly off the left by Leverkusen, and being Florian Wirtz, he's obviously targeted. So it's harder and harder in theory for him to be able to do that because you would think teams would start to man mark him or to pay more attention to him. But he still seems to be able to find those gaps, find those spaces, which speaks obviously to his game intelligence, which again, anyone who's seen him play will know is through the roof.
No, absolutely. Yeah, that is the one word that keeps coming up, that intelligence. Spoke to Kevin Hatchard yesterday, used it a couple of times along the way in the conversation too. That seems to be the standout characteristic, if you like. In terms of his sort of attacking abilities, in terms of what strings he has to his bow, was it anything in particular that sort of stood out to you? He's clearly a creative force in the Bayer Leverkusen and indeed the German side. There's clearly a strong shooting element to his game as well. What was it from obviously eye test wise, but in terms of the data too, that made you think, okay, particularly adept at this type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, eye test wise, I don't really need to tell people who've seen him this, but just how comfortable he is on the ball as soon as he receives it. He doesn't very, very rare you'll see it like bobble over his foot and go to an opposition player, or that he'll just take his eye off it and misplace a sloppy pass or whatever. But when you actually drill down into his data, you can see that it's the similar, I guess, to the progressive passes received is that he's picking up the ball in very dangerous areas quite a lot. You look at his touch map and it's all over the final third. I mean, he's a 10. I'd say he does take most of his touches off the left. But he certainly doesn't limit himself to that. He'll just keep popping up in pretty much everywhere across the pitch in that final third. And when you see the number of chances he creates from those different areas, it's not with a lot of players, obviously, especially attacking players. It will depend on what system they're playing. But when you look at a map of chances created or assists or crosses or whatever, they will all be roughly a similar area because it's like, well, that's where I play, so that's where I want to receive the ball, and that's where I'm going to create my chances. But when you look at Wirtz, the chance created map for Wirtz, it is like a kid's face with acne. You know, it's everywhere, all over that final third. So I think what the exciting thing would be if a move were to go through and Liverpool end up with the player is how Slot would utilize him, what role he'd give. I mean, I know a lot of the reports have suggested that the role that Slot has apparently laid out for Wirtz is a particularly clear one and one that appeals to him. So it'd be interesting to see what that actually is. I would assume it is a freer role because you think a player like him would think the more I can cover the pitch and take responsibility for these things, the better. So it would surprise me if it's a limited one. But when you look at the numbers he's put in for Leverkusen in those areas and the creativity all over the pitch, I would imagine that's what's drawn Liverpool towards him.
Yeah, I'll pick up on that. As I was going to ask you that towards the end of this particular section, but now we're on it. I mention it because my hunch is similar to yours in terms of he may well get that freedom and be allowed to go and express himself a little bit, but that would be quite removed from what we've seen in the season just gone in terms of certainly if he's part of the midfield three, which I kind of also expect he will be. He can clearly play in the front line too from the left, especially, but Cody Gakpo's been really good out there for me. Diaz has had moments over there as well. So, displacing one of them, albeit Florian Wirtz is an exceptional talent. Liverpool's outlay would suggest that he's going to be part of the first team plans, obviously. But how do you see that in terms of who comes out with the side then? Because to me, it would be Dominic Szoboszlai. But again, he has had such a set role and a determined you need to cover this area of the pitch. And to be fair to Szoboszlai, he's covered more than that area of the pitch often because he's every blade of grass type guy. Wirtz, we'll touch on his defending in a moment, will do that sort of dirty work as well. But yeah, can you give him the freedom whilst losing Dominic Szoboszlai's energy and pressing? I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, I mean it's going to be difficult for anyone to match what Szoboszlai was doing, certainly off the ball, and as you say, the amount of pressing, the running, the energy he brought to that role. I did, as I mentioned in the article, and obviously I think people will remember as well that Arne Slot did seem to make a point of mentioning quite often how he wanted Szoboszlai to score more goals and provide more assists. And I think towards the end of the season he was doing that. I mean, the assist he provided against Arsenal for Diaz, was it? And then again, pretty much an identical goal against Tottenham as well. I think he was doing that, and obviously gets his goal against Brighton, which it was accidental, but it was still a goal. But that was in a role when he moved back and played midfield. And of course, Slot also said after that game that, which surprised me, was that Szoboszlai apparently would rather play there. He sees himself as more of a box to box /8 of a midfielder. So it could be that if that conversation's happened and Slot thinks, well, all right, I'll move you back into that kind of role, but in that case, we'll need to bring in a 10. He thinks, well, if we're going to do that, we're going to need to get a bloody good one to replace what you've got. So while you're probably not going to replicate what Szoboszlai does, if you look at someone like Wirtz and say, well, his output is, no offense to Dominic, but significantly better in terms of goal threat and chance creation. And as you alluded to, like, he off the ball, he's certainly not a luxury player. He's not someone who's just going to walk around and watch everyone else do the work for him. He's going to put the effort in as well. So it might not quite be Szoboszlai levels, but it's one of those, like, it's the whole like short blanket thing. Like, you've got to, if you're going to lose a little bit down at the bottom, you make sure it's you're getting plenty of coverage elsewhere. So yeah, I mean, that would be my expectation, would be that he plays the 10, as you say. But I think he could play off the left, especially when you consider if Milos Kerkez is going to be the new left back, for example, the amount of width he provides and running and energy down that side, you could potentially rejig that role on the left to be maybe more central or freer. So you could move around a bit more because you've maybe got a bit more running, a bit more legs on that side. But to be honest, after what he's done with Ryan Gravenberch in the last year, I'm hesitant to say, oh, he's going to do this with this player, because clearly that's where he plays. Because I remember saying to you, I think a couple of years ago, Ryan Gravenberch is not a 6. Look
at him now. Look at him now. He wouldn't have been alone in that thought, I don't think. So I would have been right there with you, to be honest with you. But what do we know, eh? We've both touched on it now, the defensive side of his game. And I think it's been overlooked somewhat. And it may be the initial thought, because you do see the eye-catching assists and the skills and the ability in tight spaces and the invention and all the stylish stuff that Florian Wirtz possesses. But he works hard. You've mentioned in the article turnovers, you mentioned the pressures that he puts on as well, but those numbers stack up as well, it's fair to say, don't they? It's just, you could use the top line work rate, but again, beneath that, in terms of the things you've looked at in this, he's there or thereabouts as well.
Yeah, and that's the key thing, I think, with work rate, especially with attacking players. I think in the system that Slot plays, it's not just like, oh, he puts in a shift, he runs around a lot, because obviously you could that's one where you actually really do need to look at the data, because you can look at a player and be like, God, he's running around a lot, isn't he? And then you look at the data, he hasn't won a single tackle or caused a single turnover or anything. He's just running around and nothing is happening. Whereas with Wirtz, it almost works the other way, where when you watch him, he doesn't always look like he is like putting in a massive shift. Like you will spot him like walking around here and there, but it seems to be, when you look at the data, that he's picking his moments, and that, again, to keep hammering at home, that game intelligence of knowing when it's the best time to make that move, to put that pressure on. I mean, just looking back at the stats that I found at the head of the article, he averaged 1.25 high turnovers per 90 in all competitions in 2025, which was the most of any Bundesliga player who played at least 1,500 minutes. He won possession in the opposition's final third at least 15 times more than any other player. And in the Champions League, his pressured numbers were so much higher than any of his teammates. He was clearly the one who Alonso had decided in the Champions League against these high quality teams, he's going to be the one who helps us to get the ball back and to try and take control of these games. He had even much higher numbers than any Liverpool player for that metric. Well, funny enough, Szoboszlai was top for Liverpool in Champions League this season. Wirtz, I think, had about 200 more pressures than him in a similar number of games. But of course, that benefits Liverpool, as anyone who watched them last season knows. Is they're not quite the Jurgen Klopp like we chase them until we drop kind of energy about them, but they still love a high turnover and they press high. And yeah, Liverpool scored the joint most goals from high turnovers in the Premier League last year. So having someone who's very good at making them in that area of the pitch should suit.
Turns out I was downplaying just how good he was on that side of the game. But literally, as I introduced the fact that we shouldn't downplay that side of the game, yeah, phenomenal, really. Absolutely. Again, I've literally got it written down in front of me, but still, when you say it out loud, it's even more impressive than what it looks like. Yeah, remarkable stuff. Just finally on Florian Wirtz, then, from everything you've seen, again, eye test coupled with data, if indeed this move does go through, as we're still anticipating it will do, you're backing him to be a success.
I mean, yes, it's obviously difficult when it comes to Liverpool making these kinds of deals because you have to battle against the whole. I want him to be a success, so I'm just going to my brain is going to not allow me to think of any other scenario. But no, I mean, at his numbers, you watch him and you hear obviously everyone who's watched him a lot more than we have says about him, and you just think there's nothing certain in football. You never know with a transfer. There have been transfers. Bigger transfers than this that looked more certain and nailed on that just for whatever reason didn't work out. So you can't say for absolute certainty. But I would say of all of the players who Liverpool could reasonably get and would need to pay that kind of money for, this is about as close as you're going to get to a sure thing. I mean, some people might say, not Premier League proven or whatever, but I mean, you could argue neither was Mo Salah when we signed him. He played in the Premier League, but he certainly wasn't proven, and he's done pretty well. So yeah, it's. I mean, me and my colleagues were having a chat this morning about it, and they referenced obviously the fact it would be an over £100 million deal, we assume, and how few of them have actually worked out over the years for other clubs. So we'll probably be writing something to that effect in the next few days of like, Wirtz has come in, but probably most transfers that have been over £100 million have been considered flops. But yeah, I don't think this is going to be, but touch wood.
Yeah, let's hope not. Let's absolutely hope not. Yeah, I must admit, but there's been two very, very, very small niggling doubts in my mind about this transfer, and they are very small. One was the injury, and I know it's about 3 years ago now, but it still happened. And I must admit, having spoken to Kevin yesterday, and he basically allayed all of my fears about that. That's now gone. The other one is what you just mentioned there, the fact he's never done it in the Premier League, which is stupid. It's silly because he's a wonderful footballer. He's done it in the Bundesliga at an international level. But there is just something about coming to the Premier League where you think, because that would be the narrative. Over £100 million is a story, plus never been in the Premier League before. That's the only thing, but I'm sure it'll be fine. I'm sure it'll be all fine.